Good morning, everybody. It's a Monday morning. Let's do a really quick video. I'm not even putting in my little speaker earplugs or anything. I'm just going to do a quick video on some quick observations, things that I've been thinking through. Sorry if the voice quality isn't as good as it normally is. I was talking with some friends the other day. We're all sitting around this table and we're talking, and there's different dynamics. A number of us were divorced already with children. Um, Two people were going through a divorce, one possibly going through a divorce. And we're trying to give a listening ear and just be like supportive of this one particular person who's going through a divorce because it's really tough. It's really hard when you're going through it, especially with children, and you're not sure how it's going to work. And the divorce court mafia process just seems absolutely insurmountable. So, and this one lady who's going through it, we're trying to give her advice too. You know, anyway, I had some comments I was going to say, but if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So I won't. But nevertheless, a friend of mine who is in a rocky marriage that has possibly been, his marriage might end, and he really was kind of leaning towards it, which I think probably more men should file, to be honest. Neither here nor there. And I realized that his language, when he's talking about his wife, hopefully they work it out, changed a bit. And in fact, it registered to me that the way he was talking about his marriage and his spouse and things was changing. And later on, I had to call him later that day for something. I don't even remember what it was. And I asked him, hey man, are you listening to this podcast, this Marriage Helper podcast? It's called Marriage Helper, Dr. Joe Beam and his daughter. I think her name is Emily. Anyway, I think it's Dr. Joe Beam, Marriage Helper. It's very good stuff. If you're still in a marriage and it's on the rocks and you're trying to, let's say, win your spouse back, it's very helpful. At the time when I was going through it, I thought it was very good. And so if you're in that situation, maybe check it out, Marriage Helper. But also it is a business and it makes these very big, almost outlandish, like every couple that comes through this course, they reconcile and their marriage is saved, these type of things, right? And so it's like our marriage rate of saving marriages is, something crazy like 98%, something like that. You know what I mean? So it's also a business. And it's not bad in that it plays on your emotions, because especially if you don't want the marriage to end, it really plays on your hopes. So anyway, I was talking to this guy and he's like, yeah, I was listening to the Marriage Helper. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I could tell. And he says, well, how come you never told me about, he's asking me, how come you've never told me about this? I wish I would have known about this sooner. Because him and I have talked a little bit about the divorce process and stuff. And it's like, I didn't even think about it, man. And he's like, well, that's such good information, man. I wish, you could have talked about this or something. And I said, that's very interesting, man. I didn't think about it. And he's like, well, are you still listening to that? And I said, no, man. That's probably why I forgot. Is I had to stop listening to it. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, it was so hopeful that it was no longer helpful. It was so hopeful. If you do these things, if you practice this thing, the thing that they go off of is like trying to attract your spouse. Oh, look at that. You see my son's little decorations over there? Because I got these little cat ears over here. The thing they go off of is trying to be attractive to your spouse, trying to attract your spouse back to you so that you don't divorce. And so they have this acronym, it's P.I.E.S. P.I.E.S. It's working on your physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual improvement. So physical, getting in shape. If you're like gross and no longer your spouse isn't just attracted to you anymore. You gain too much weight. And this goes for men or women, right? Your grooming habits are bad, something like this. Like work on those things first, and then work on your intellectual acumen. Get better, right? Improve yourself. Read some things. Um, Dive deep on just having a more attractive mind for your spouse. Emotional, right? Like getting your emotions under control and self-regulating better, so that your spouse can see you're making good decisions. Things like this, and then of course spiritual. Drawing closer to God, going to church, some kind of spiritual practice that makes you more attractive. And I would say overall, those are great things, right? Like, and in a marriage, you forget to do that. I think you forget to do that. You forget to work on your P.I.E.S: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. And so the premise is, if you do these things, and go through our course as a couple or by yourself, whatever it is, and focus on these things, which I think they're very good. I really enjoyed listening to it, especially when I was going through the divorce, in the hopes that maybe this could be turned around. Maybe my spouse would want me back. Maybe we could work this out, And there came a point where, like, the divorce court mafia dates just keep coming in. Like, unless the other person calls it off, once the process starts, it just keeps going. Like, you have to have a certain amount of things in by a certain amount of days. You have to have financial statements in. You have to have a parenting plan in place. You have to work on how you're going to pay the bills in the meantime. All these things, and it just keeps coming to where you don't have time to work on your P.I.E.S necessarily, because it's all consuming. It's all consuming in your thoughts. And all you can do is focus on the bills you have to pay, trying to be a parent, and focusing on getting the divorce over with. Even if you're the person that don't want it, the court levels dates and actions on you, and you have to do them. Otherwise, you may not get any parenting time. That's kind of how they threaten that. They really crank on that, man. You have to have this stuff done, or you're in contempt of court like a criminal. And you're likely to get less parenting time, stuff like that. So you really don't get to work on your P.I.E.S. But for those people that are not there yet, I think that's a great thing, Marriage Helper, working on your P.I.E.S. Okay. But anyway, he was asking me this, and that's just the only thing I could come up with. I was like, it was too hopeful. And that's it. It was too hopeful, man. Like, I was so convinced that if I could just get my spouse at the time, if we could just sit down and go through some of these and learn from these experts, on marriage and relationships and communication, then this thing could be saved. But when the other person makes it very clear that there is no redemption in this, or coming back, or for that matter, a want. Like, when the other person just doesn't want you. They just don't want you. And it's okay to say that. It's like they just don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore for various reasons, good or bad. It doesn't matter. It's done. And so listening to those kind of things, though they are good if you can catch them in time, there's a point where it doesn't matter what you do. Hope isn't helpful. And that's what I told him. It's like, well, I don't know. I mean, that stuff is really great for people that can do it, but it wasn't helping me recover. Because having hope that, the person will come back and we can work this out, and it could be, I say this all the time, I think people's marriages can be better than they ever were. I believe that really for other people. And so it's like, I think knowing when to call it a day and just cutting bait, and it's like, the other person just doesn't want to be here. Okay, fine. And so, for what it's worth, y'all, there's a point where hope isn't helpful. It doesn't help you recover. It doesn't help you get over anything. And so, you kind of have to cut that out in that regard. But here's the better part. There's other ways of being hopeful. There's other, more pertinent ways of being hopeful. I have high hope for my standards as a father. I love spending all the time with my kid that I can. I'm a good dad. I'm very present with him, right? I am good at what I do in my community, right? There are things that I'm working on right now that I have a healthy fear of, but I'm trying to better myself, and it's not easy. But there's some things that I'm looking at going to school for that I want to do, and I have to be the best version of myself and show up for that. And so, like, I'm facing that like right now, like today, signing up for some classes that scares me to death. But I'm hopeful that I'm able to better myself, right? I'm working on my pies, as it were, for me and my son. So, and not for another person, not for a spouse or a lover. I want to, let's say, get better at these pies for my own self, and for my son's sake. So there is that. Last thought. Just thinking back about this. When you're in a marriage and everybody wants to, okay, so this is for men, and this is certainly the case for me. I would get this kind of puffed up pride ego in that I was working two jobs, and so it's like I'm paying for everything. Why am I getting so much heat for anything and everything I do? Why is this so contentious? And it's like it's easy to get in your ego and just be like, well, I did this, I do this, I do that. Both sides, not just the guy. And why can't you do this? Why can't you be like this? Whatever it is, right? And I have done this, not always, but I have done this. I think we're all guilty of it. Betting on my own ego versus the goodness of your spouse. Betting on my own ego and my own demands, or let's say my own worldview. Betting on the ego of my worldview more than I'm betting on the goodness of my spouse. If you know your spouse is a good person, they may not be amazing, but they're trying. And you know that at the end of the day, they actually love you, or at least like you, at least, minimum. And I see how those things can be. You can misalign yourself with your partner if you do that too much. Betting on your own worldview and the ego that you have versus betting on the fact that they actually like you and that they actually mean good for you. And that's important for a lot of reasons, I think, not just spouses. But anyway, there's a couple thoughts. Giving up hope, I don't think that's a bad thing. Giving up hope when it's no longer helpful, so that you can let the relationship burn off, die off, and have a hope for other things. Which tends to really resurrect your soul after a divorce. And then betting on the other person's goodness towards you rather than your ego and always having to be right, I think, some things to think about anyway. That's all I'm saying. Everybody have a good day.